director of ACEPIS, and I'm trying to look for, yes, the African Center for People, Institutions and Society. It's an Afrocentric think tank. Let's listen to Ken.
Hi, Gary. I have a question. In these COVID-19 times, when businesses are hard hit and barely surviving, what do you consider as a better mechanism for enforcing tax compliance? Is it threats or is it taxpayer education and incentives?
So I'm hoping threats is nowhere on your list of options, Caxton.
Of course not, of course not.
Yeah, but talk to us about, ensuring tax compliance.
First, I think it is important to appreciate that in Kenya, taxes are done through self-assessment, so they are voluntary. And that is our target, to ensure that as much tax as possible can be paid voluntarily. And that means that we have put in place all the mechanisms that are required by taxpayers to pay, including automation, access to information relating to payment of taxes, training and sensitization, and stakeholder engagement. You receive sometimes mails from KRA advising you about tax payments, returns are due, and this is all aimed at ensuring that our taxpayers access services and are able to settle their taxes without being coerced. It's also important that we have also put into place facilitative mechanisms to ensure that taxpayers don't overly suffer when settling taxes, including a much more easy to apply dispute management system, so that you don't have to go to courts to be heard. You don't have to go to the tax appeals tribunal to be heard. You can actually come back to the commissioner and have your taxes reviewed. If you have evidence that your assessments were not correctly done, you can come forward and say, look here, this is my evidence, please consider review of your position. And this is done through our alternative dispute resolution mechanism. It's also important to appreciate that if any taxpayer, for reasons associated with the current challenges that they are facing, finds a cash flow problem, you can always go to the commissioner and say, instead of paying this tax in 1 month, can I pay in 2 months, in 3 months? And this will be granted based on the mitigating circumstances. So taxpayers and the tax collection in Kenya is voluntary, and that is how we would like it to be.
And with digital services tax, just like TOT as well, it's a self-declaration, right? I come on there, and so how do you ensure compliance for a tax like that? For those who are salaried, tax is deducted at source, and all those who are employed do is to literally just file their returns, essentially saying that, yes, KRA, what you have is the same thing I have with the P9. But then how do you ensure compliance for one where we bring ourselves tunajileta kwa KRA kusema this is the amount of money I've made? How do you ensure that one, the taxes they declare, or the profits or gross sales or turnover is actually correct as stated?
Yes, in as much as the law and our programs are aimed at facilitating taxpayers to pay their correct share of taxes, the same law also empowers the Revenue Authority to go for those who have not declared the correct tax liabilities, or those who refuse to pay taxes. For those who have not declared the correct tax liabilities, we have what we call compliance checks and audits. So we basically ask you for some information so that we can establish your correct tax liability. We also have our own mechanisms of trying to cross-check whether the taxpayers are making correct disclosures of their tax liability in the returns. And this is by trying to look into the footprint that taxpayers leave behind as they trade in the economy.
I mean, okay. So like what we post on Facebook, And we brag about a new car that we've got, and you're wondering, well, when we take a look at the taxes here, this doesn't quite add up. She shouldn't be able to afford going on holiday every quarter of the year or something. I don't know. You know, when you are trading in the economy, I mean, you're buying from someone. Right. You're providing services to someone. You're getting contracts from government. And this is available for us. So what we do is we get that and we cross-check. Now, it's even better with the voluntary disclosure program, because what is happening today is that even though we will get information relating to you, we will ask you first to take advantage of the voluntary disclosure program before we actually issue with a notice of audit or compliance check. Remember that if we issue a notice, then you lose the privileges or the relief that is granted under the program. Okay. Just a quick one, because I want to get to a video that we have just received as well. What happens if people don't register? You said there's a deadline, particularly for digital services tax, the individuals there to register by, they have up to the 20th of February? I think registration is going to be continuous, but everyone who is already in the business of digital service tax, we have done public notification of them to come forward and register, but we expect all of them to register by the end of this month, so that they're able to account for their taxes and start paying the taxes by the 20th of the following month. Yes. And if they don't, they'll be subject to the enforcement? Yes. Again, enforcement measures follow for persons who refuse to comply with the law. Okay. Let's get into another question from one of our viewers. Caxton, let's watch a video from Ebrima Fati. Well, we think that the ecosystem is nascent, is young, and perhaps we should be given some time to grow, and this doesn't apply only to the e-commerce ecosystem, but to the tech ecosystem at large in Africa. It's nascent, so we think we need encouragement until the ecosystem is able to stand on its feet, and then those things can come, because we cannot say they cannot come, because this is a source of income for the government, and therefore also for the larger population. So, but our stand is that maybe we should be allowed to grow before the taxes come. Yeah, and I think that's related, Caxton, to what I'd asked you earlier, that people say it's still, a very new sort of ecosystem and giving it some time. What are your thoughts regarding that? The principle of fairness needs to kick in every time we are addressing our taxpayers. Remember that you can go into the normal business model, and when you register, when you start business, taxes start kicking in as soon as you meet the thresholds that are defined under the law. So it should be the same for those who trade online, that they are required to comply with taxation from the word go. Remember also that taxation is meant to take not the whole the whole of your earnings. It takes only a portion of it that has been defined legally as within the health limits of a business. Okay. I want to ask you this regarding the minimum tax. PricewaterhouseCoopers gave their view on this, I think sometime late last year, in talking about this. They said, and I quote, that it may result in unintended economic effects in respect of businesses, especially where it represents an additional cost to the business rather than a tax on actual income earned by the business, especially in low-margin businesses and new businesses which would be unprofitable, as you know, in the initial years of business. What's your response to that statement by Pricewaterhouse? Now, I think it is it's good to appreciate that the concept of minimum tax is not a concept exclusive to Kenya. In Africa alone, over 15 countries have adopted minimum tax. Several other jurisdictions have adopted minimum tax.
And it is also good to appreciate that when you are dealing with some of these institutions, they have what we call perpetual losses. And this can emanate from tax planning. They plan their tax arrangements in such a way that they don't make any contribution. You've heard about people, you know, some people boasting that they are smart enough to beat the tax systems. But remember that we still need a contribution from these people. How can you explain, Yvonne, a company existing for 20 years, making losses for 20 years, and they do not fold up?
But Caxton, some would say then go after the tax cheats. Why introduce a minimum tax to try and net in waliomo na wasiokuwemo? There are some, obviously, who have, you know, ill intention to try and beat the system. But there are others, you know, like we know the statistics that continue to come up that, you know, many businesses, you know, don't make profit until their second or third year, and then they're slapped to the minimum tax. So some would say, like you rightfully say, there are tax cheats, so go after the tax cheats rather than introduce a minimum tax to try and get them.
Yes, we have programs that go after tax cheats. We have a full-fledged investigation department. We have an intelligence gathering department. And this is aimed at people who are fraudulent, people who basically try to develop schemes and do concealment so as to beat the tax regimes in this country. So those measures are there. We will get to those. But also, a minimum contribution has been identified by most jurisdictions as the best way to ensure that persons who access services in a country make a small contribution.
Let's get some more questions. I think these ones are now from our text line, 22422. I think we've gotten the WhatsApp videos and we've gotten some tweets. Here is one question, Caxton. Not this one. Can we get the other one that was talking about the taxes? This one. Hello. Does the tax amnesty also apply to individuals who have not filed nil returns because they don't have any principal to pay? I don't know if this makes sense to you.
I am trying to understand what the person means, but I think generally everyone who has undisclosed tax liability can take advantage of this program. So as long as you have liabilities that were not disclosed before, you can come forward and make a disclosure.
Okay, there's another text message. I think it was the next one after this one. Hello, are there any plans to give waivers on those who delayed to file their tax returns? I mean, I think this is under the tax amnesty program, right? But there are no waivers, let's say for this year. You know, now we're getting into that period between January and June. I think he's already asking for waivers even before. Even before the period has elapsed, yes.
Yes, I think, Yvonne, you are right. You can't ask for waivers in advance. Waivers are normally provided for accrued taxes.
Okay.
And they are usually provided for when tax has already become due and payable.
All right. Here's a tweet, again, just asking for some more clarification on the exemptions to the newly introduced digital tax. I know you'd mentioned them, but I think this might be somebody who wants to just get a clarification on that. You talked about businesses that are already paying which tax. Could you just take us through those who are exempt from the digital service tax? Yes.
Digital service tax, persons doing transmission messages like media houses, telecommunications services, banking and financial services. If you are in that category, you're not supposed to be paying taxes. Those who are lending and forex and payment systems. So if you are in these categories of business, Yvonne, then it's exempted because it has also been found that these are among the tax categories that are fairly compliant. And we have not had a major problem in these areas.
So things like mobile money transfers will not be affected?
No.
Those who are lending, the fintechs, are not affected by this because they're already paying that. Okay, so the questions continue to come in for that. The East African Tax Governance Network is asking, what does voluntary tax payment mean? The government is giving reprieve to businesses that haven't disclosed their tax liabilities. But, tell us what exactly the voluntary tax payment means that you are coming in to declare. Could you just clarify that again?
If you have a tax liability that accrued...
and by tax liability, it means if you did not declare taxes.
Yes.
I have many Kenyans who might not understand.
Yes, and there are many taxes.
Okay.
You have corporation taxes paid by companies. You have excise taxes paid on certain specific goods. You have VAT and many other, declarations that you are supposed to make. Including withholding taxes. So if any of these taxes accrued in the period 1st of July 2015 to 30th of June 2020, and you did not pay the tax at that time as required under the law, then what you have been given is an opportunity to come forward and pay the taxes.
Okay.
And this also follows a revamption of our audit program, which is now fully rolled out. And what we didn't want also is to catch up these taxpayers now and subject them to a lot of penalties and interest, and also to support taxpayers in this difficult time. The government thought that the best approach would be to allow these people to come forward, make a declaration of their tax liability, and then they enjoy a waiver of penalties and interest.
Okay, we have, let me take a question from our SMS line. I believe it was this one. Does a software providing company need to pay any taxes? Maybe this would also be for DST. It's a registered company in Kenya, partnered with a US company to resell their software.
I think the question is, how do they sell the software?
Okay.
So if a software is downloadable from some portal somewhere, then yes, taxes are due, because that means you are offering that service online, and the transaction is being concluded online. Okay. So what you are doing is offering an online service.
All right. Kipleting Manuela on Twitter says, how will a newly started business, an online one, let me rephrase that. How will a newly online business that was started in January 2021, that's this month, pay digital tax? How much tax will you pay when you're in the first month of business?
Digital service tax is accounted for monthly. And you account for it when you have made sales of the service online, if you've made a supply online. And the tax that is payable is 1.5% of the gross sales amount. So basically, it will depend on your sales for the month. Yes.
Here's the text message from Alex Ishuga. Says, my company pays tax for me. I think must be a salaried individual, but I've always failed to declare from my end. Will I benefit from the waiver?
Yes.
Okay.
If that declaration is made for that period, you remember it is within a period.
Yes.
And there is any taxes due from that person, then there will be a waiver of penalty and interest. To remember that as individuals, we earn from our employers, but we also can have business income as individuals. So at the end of the year, your declaration should capture both.
Right. What
you earn from your employment and what you have earned elsewhere. I hope you are doing such a declaration.
Yes, I am happy to note that I have a tax clearance certificate. And yes, I'm making my declarations. I'm in the process of doing that for this current financial year. I hope you have made your declarations as well, Caxton.
Yes, and I think it is important to let people know that for the year 2020, you have up to June to file your return.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be done in June. it can be done up to. So it can be done this month, next month, the month after that.
And the earlier the better.
The earlier the better, certainly, so that we don't all clog the system and then it, starts to to crash and do that. We thank you so much for making the time for us today. We really appreciate this, and we hope that we continue to see more and more of you to demystify the taxman, as it were.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Caxton Masudi, who's a Deputy Commissioner Policy and Tax Advisory. Where am I? I'm over here saying goodbye to all of you. Thank you so much for sending in your questions in all the platforms that we have provided for you today. We'll be doing this from time to time, bringing persons that are experts in a field that you would like to get your questions answered. We obviously couldn't answer all of them, but we thank you very much for that. Continue to follow us for more updates. The hashtag is Business Now, and we will see you again next week, Monday. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole. Have a very good afternoon. Bye-bye.